evening and welcome on the channel tonight. I have Pete and Matt, the co-authors of the book Britpop Decades, and I'd like to welcome them both to the channel. Welcome, gentlemen. Are you both all right?
Yeah, very good. Thanks, David. Thanks for having us.
It's okay.
Yeah, thank you.
So, first off, how do you two know each other, and how did you? When did you decide to put your brains together and come up with a book?
I think I'm right in saying we met when we were about 9 years old. Is that right, Matt?
In middle school. That's right. Well, I kind of saw you before that when you were Grandpa Joe in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Just to throw that in there.
Yeah, it's a very good, my illustrious theatre career. But yeah, you saw me in a first school play, but I didn't see you until middle school. And then our eyes met across a crowded playground. And we said, do you know what we need to do? In 30 years from now, we need to write a book about Britpop. But in the intervening years of that, we were just schoolmates, really, weren't we? And then we were adult mates, and then we were band mates. And then we went back to just being adult mates, and then we became book mates, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, the book itself is a really recent thing. It was sort of, it came out of, I mean, we've always met up. Whenever we meet up, we always have a talk about music and chat about different things and discuss and try and put the music world to rights, etc. And then I think, Pete, you came up with the idea, why don't we just have a go at doing a book on it? And it kind of flew along from there, really. It all seems to have happened so fast. I mean, it was only about a year ago we were talking about even starting it. So it really happened really quickly.
Yeah, I think we'd both read books by, and we were, I think rather arrogantly, we both went, oh, we could do that, and then we sent them an email and they said, go on then, prove it. So then we had to write a book.
So have you got any experience in writing books before, or is this is the debut for you both in a book?
Essentially, yeah, it's essentially our book debut. I mean, weirdly, I'd just before I started this, I'd finished writing a book version of a podcast sitcom I write. So I'd just finished one book and then moved on to this, and halfway through this book I had to write a children's book, which came in because essentially writing words in different forms is my living. But this is the first time we've managed to get a book published for certain. I'm just trying to think. Like before this, we'd both done like little bits of music journalism and contributing to fanzines and things.
What did you both? What you're saying? You wrote for fanzine? Did you write for fanzines back in the 90s, or just?
Basically, we were doing fanzine bits and pieces mostly in the 2000s. As a general rule, we're both from Worcestershire. I'll start that again. We're both from Worcestershire, and there's a couple of fanzines there, and we looked after a fanzine for some friends called Rhythm and Booze for a time. I think I weirdly had a column in the local paper for a while on the local music scene. I think I had a couple of bits published in NME, which was a bit unexpected right in the mid 2000s, and I don't know, we just
mainly bits and
nothing
bobs,
like
wasn't it?
Sorry,
there's mainly bits and bobs that sort of, different bits have cropped up. You've done more than I have.
Yeah, but usually I made you do the research for it. I just took the glory.
Yeah, story of our lives.
Yeah. Which I think should segue neatly into your next question, David.
Well, sort of. What I was going to say is, what was your plan of attack for the book? So you've already said you sort of you went to the publisher and they said prove it. So what was your plan of attack once you decided yes you was going to do it?
Well, in part, because the book is part of the Sonic Bond publishing repertoire. They have several titles. So the first thing we had to, several types of books they publish. So the first thing we had to do was decide what we wanted to do a book on, and we'd already settled on Britpop because we were both essentially Britpop kids, obviously, and then it was sort of like, oh well, what does that fit into? And Sonic Bond stated that they felt it would fit better into the Decades series of books they've got.
Yeah.
And the Decades series of books usually just concentrates on one band. And I think we're the first people to sort of say, well, we don't want to do a band. We want to cover, for want of a better word, genre of music within the Decades framework. So certain things were sort of dictated to us. We knew that we had to do. We knew that we were following a 10-year format, and we from that it was quite obvious that we'd have to include an element of what was going on in each of those years in order to try and give some context to the music that was out at that time. I think where we sort of differed a little bit from other Decades books is that we included a lot of extra information. So rather than just the detailed track by track analysis information, we covered a lot of smaller write-ups of other albums which we had deemed important from each year. We included a rundown of everything that was going on in that year, sort of culturally, for want of a better word, and also a lot of our own thoughts and feelings and our own sort of experiences of the 90s and of how we became aware of bands and of what those bands meant to us in our sort of slightly rural retreat of of Worcestershire.
I think also as well, the original sort of idea we were sort of mulling over was that sort of chatting in the pub about music and the to and fro's and what's the best album of this and what the particular band's best album, and it kind of grew from that. But actually what's gone into the book is a reduced version of that in some ways, because we've had to keep in line with that sort of Sonic Bonds in terms of what they wanted at the end. So we did have to pull back a bit on that, which is probably for the best in the end, because we could have gone on for ages on some of those topics. But that was kind of the starting point, is that chat down the pub, and then it was pulling together lists of what was released when, and then what did we like the most at the time, and excluding some stuff, including other stuff. What were good albums? What were just bands that had good singles, etc. So it kind of all came together quite quickly, and we put together, I think wasn't it 1994 was the draft chapter we sent across, and they had a look at it and they wanted us to change some things, and that was kind of then the sort of template for the rest of the book then. And it came together quite easy in terms of what we wanted to cover. I mean, there's a bit more in terms of actual detail of what we were putting in, but what we wanted to cover actually flowed quite nicely then.
Yeah, interestingly, in terms of the pulling back element as well, we overwrote, we massively overwrote, and in terms of other Sonic Bond books, I believe we're still about 20,000 words over their standard. They let us really overrun to sort of include everything we wanted to. The last thing I should say on that as well is, by way as a publishing house, Sonic Bond concentrates made things actually a lot more difficult than you'd think, because we'd be sort of having our pub conversation saying like, well, it's clear this has got to be in and this has got to be in, and it's sort of like they're essentially a singles band, or for want of a better word, a Britpop one-hit wonder. They never even made an album, and it's sort of like, well, how can we include them? Do we include them? Do we just move on and concentrate on the albums which we know are the big hitters? A lot had to hit the cutting room floor.
Yeah. Well, I can imagine the size of the book. If they'd let you put everything in, it'd come in like this.
Yeah.
It sounds like you had a really fun time putting this book together, and even though it snowballed, like I said, it only happened in the space of a year. How was it actually doing the research for you both then? Was it a lot of late nights, or?
Well, I think we'd have had a lot more fun if we hadn't put it together during a pandemic. We'd have spent a lot more time actually in a pub doing it than we did. Well, we didn't do any of it in the pub because we couldn't, just chatting online and stuff. But yeah, I mean, I can't really speak for the research element of it because I am a dreadful researcher. I was very much basing things based on what I remembered, and then relying on Matt to go and do all the donkey work and actually gather all the facts, figures, and then present to me large bundles, which I would then take off and try and sort of smash into some sort of first draft for him to then pull apart. Matt, would you like to comment on or the hours you spent researching this book?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it was online, really. There's in some cases there's just an absolute wealth of material, although actually, it's quite amazing how the history has changed over the years. So, you'd read articles from like the Melody Maker or Sounds or Select or NME from the time about what was going on, recording dates, and then bands are asked about it 20, 30 years later, and their memories are completely different to what it was. So trying to sort through that and actually work out when things actually happened was quite difficult. But I found quite a few articles by the producers and the recording engineers. They are often really good at sort of giving you that detail in terms of what was recorded and when. And then there was one Select article on Blur songs for the first few albums. And that was really good because it covered all their B-sides, everything for like the first 3-4 albums worth. And that saved such a massive amount of time, because they moved around studios quite a bit, which makes it quite hard to work out where they recorded what and what they were doing when. And of course they also would take the tapes with them, so they carried on songs in different studios wherever they were. So that was that could be quite difficult. But Tim Burgess listening parties he did on Twitter over the lockdown, he used to play an album, and the bands who made that album would then put in memories as it was going along. Oh, this track was recorded here, there, and everywhere, and that filled in quite a lot of information that just wasn't there other time, to do anything with, because amazingly some of these bands, there's little to no detail in terms of when they recorded what they did when, or how it all was, like Denim or Sleeper, or even there's very little on when things were recorded sometimes. So some of it was easy, it was actually boiling it down to the key bits, and other bits was trying to piece something together out of not very much.
Yeah, I can imagine for a band maybe like Denim, or even a smaller band like you said that had one single, sorry, it would be very hard to find information out there on them. Yeah.
I believe there's practically nothing on Denim, and Blur, for being essentially the Beatles of the 90s, they just recorded anywhere with a microphone as a general rule. Like just we'll do that there tomorrow, we'll move over to there the next day. it's kind of like, well, where's your Abbey Road, guys? I suppose Oasis were in Abbey Road.
Yeah, it was filling it out. Yeah. I mean, I must admit, I was a bit of a latecomer to Denim. They weren't the first band that I picked up, but once I joined Twitter and I was made aware of Denim, I went and listened to it, and they've grown on me over time, and I'm that. But I'm aware of their place in the Britpop history now. There at the beginning, so yeah.
Yeah, we have a strange argument even within the book about Denim, in that I'm of the opinion that everybody had Denim, and we all listen to Denim all the time. Matt has absolutely no recollection of any of us having the Denim album whatsoever, and we're not talking like a huge group of friends. Like, we're not talking about hundreds of people. We're talking around about 9 per sure, and I'm pretty sure we all had it. But Matt's memory, to be fair, is probably better than mine.
So, moving on. How hard was it then? You've got all these bands. How hard was it to decide which bands you was going to put in the book and which bands you was going to leave on the floor, as you said? Because there must be over 100. Did you have over 100 bands, and you had to?
Yeah, probably more than that. Actually, we probably, to start off with, we probably had 150 bands sort of on the list. And then trying to pull it back down was probably the worst bit. I mean, there's certain bands you're gonna cover. If you're writing a book about Britpop, you're gonna be covering Blur, Oasis. Yeah, they are gonna be getting a mention. Then there's loads and loads of bands that you want to mention as well. Sort of, let's call it the second tier, third tier. Your kind of local famous Britpop bands, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Every area seemed to have one, and sort of knowing who you're going to include and who you're not going to include, I suppose, in a way, ended up being dictated by the album. So we had to, for every year in the book, we've had to pick out the 3 key albums, and then we've tried to make sure that every year has at least another 3 very important albums which are covered. So there's a minute within itself, and been able to include in there. The other thing was we would have probably liked to have kept with every band. So once we chose a band that we were going to be including in the book, let's say Carter, the Unstoppable Sex Machine, we include one album by them, and it would have been nice, they were there throughout the entirety of the 90s. So it would have been lovely if we could have included them on, album by album every year that they released one. But just simply wasn't the space to do that.
No.
It wasn't possible. So it's almost, we had to sort of decide. It was a balancing act to be able to tell the story of the year and the story of the decade at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, I must admit, I did take it on. I took the book on face value. I just thought, it's going to be another Britpop book, and it's just going to be a list of bands, blah blah blah, and it's going to be like an encyclopedia sort of thing. I took it on face value. I thought, this is what it's going to be, and I was quite shocked on, like you said, the bits of banter you have on every album inside it and things like that. I don't want to go into too much detail and spoil it to anyone who's watching this and hasn't read the book, but it shocked me now.
The spoiler is it's a big book about Britpop.
Yeah. And it shocked me on some of the albums you chose to go into more detail about than other albums, if you know what I mean, because there are bands in it, but you go into detail about some albums, but not other albums. And I think that's what I liked about it, because I thought, I don't want to read about that, but that's fine. You've left that as it is, and then further on, I was like, well, yeah, you've gone into more detail about that. This one, which is probably one of my favourites over the other one, which I thought was really good. do you guys have a favourite album or band that's in the book or not in the book yourselves?
Well, I think it's fair to say all my favourites are in the book, but probably not given as much coverage as you know, if I had only my way, they would have. You know, the Long Pigs, Sun Is Often Out, would have probably had a much more detailed analysis. Elastica does get a. I would love to dig deeper on Elastica. Menswear, who are essentially in my mind the most important Britpop band. I would have loved to have spent a lot more time digging into Menswear, but ultimately, if you can only pick 3 key albums from 1995, you're not going to end up dedicating 12 pages of your book to Menswear, which is a great shame from my point of view, but probably not a great shame from Matt's point of view.
Yeah, I mean, from my point of view, I mean, I went with kind of an obvious sort of one, is that I've always thought that Park Life by Blur is, you know, one of their better and one of the better and consistent albums for the Britpop era for me. I mean, there's other great albums out there, but some of them, you know, they do have a bit of filler here and there, but I always felt that, you know, Part Life for Blur was their kind of, that was their peak, and they've come close with some of their others, but for me that was it, and that's always going to be the pinnacle. That's kind of, it was my favorite, one of my favorites at the time. It still is. After doing the book, it probably is still one that I can listen to a lot. I mean, some of the albums we revisited here, I'm not sure I'd revisit some of them again for a bit, especially some of the really longer ones with big deluxe editions with lots of remixes. You know, I'd probably leave those for a bit longer before I came back, but I can always come back to Part Life, I think.
Nice. Are you both in agreement?
There are some sins of omission as well in terms of the choices, such as like, you know, both Be Here Now and The Great Escape get positively short shrift from us for what we're essentially sold as 2 of the most culturally important albums of the 90s. We kind of went, well, they weren't though, were they? So we gave them a mention. They've got their place in the book, but they don't get the detailed analysis, which I suppose some people coming to it might expect.
Hello? Yeah.
Hello, can you hear us?
No, it just cut out for a little bit, but it's all right.
Oh, sorry.
No, I have to agree with you there. They're not my favourite albums, and they're 2 of the albums I'm glad you didn't go in. They're there, they've got the place, but yeah, there was more to talk about than them 2 as a whole. Are you both in agreement then?
Excellent, we found our audience.
Would you say that your favourite year was 1995 then? Because Pete, you've talked about Menswear and Elastica, and Matt, you've spoke about Park Life. Is your favourite year 95? Out of the whole book, is that your favourite year?
Ooh. Oh. Yeah, I'll go with that. Yeah. I
think it's either going to be, I'd go for 95. I think that's
but not just because of the music. It was a glorious time. We finished school. It was baking hot. Every week there was a new band or new music. Like it's ridiculous the amount of records that well, maybe I didn't buy them, but I was taping off the radio, right? Yeah. It's ridiculous the amount of VHS tapes I've got of Top of the Pops and other shows from 1995. It was an incredible time. It was an incredible time to be 16 years old. It was brilliant.
Wow. You were 16, I was 12 in 95.
Oh well, you'd have loved it. We just learned that we could get served in the local pub at that point.
Is there anything you would change about the book now if you could, if you had the chance to do like a revised edition, I'm not saying there isn't going to be in a year's time down the line, would you take any bands out or add any bands in?
Oh, it's a really good question. I mean, if we could do a massively expanded version, we'd probably go back to the 150 bands and include all the singles and things which we also think are important. In fact, there's probably scope to say we could probably just do another book based on singles rather than concentrating on albums.
Right there. Yeah.
I mean, maybe personally, in terms of taking bands out, I felt very strongly that the Stereophonics' second album deserved a lot of mention, as it were, a big place in the book, because I felt it was very important in terms of explaining what came next, in terms of like Coldplay and things like that. However, maybe if I wasn't trying to write a book which was based more on personal taste than on trying to give the flavour of the decade, maybe I wouldn't have spent quite such a long time revisiting that particular record, which I remember at the time being very, very disappointed by, given how much I absolutely loved their first album.
Okay, so what happened to Rialto then, Pete?
What happened to Rialto? What happened to so many bands? Where's Marion? Where's PJ Harvey? Echo Belly only get one mention.
I didn't even notice that they weren't in it. I've read it twice.
I mean, Powder. I would have happily written
Powder
pages
on the
and pages
Powder. No, Powder
on Powder.
No.
Yeah, Super Furry Animals, I think, only get one mention.
Yeah,
like second album, which is brilliant, an absolutely brilliant album, and probably could have even quite happily taken the place of, say, OK Computer in terms of like a detailed track by track analysis. But no, we just had to hit the floor as we sort of barreled towards the end of the century. Yeah, that was a good soundbite.
Yeah. What do you feel makes your book stand out from the other Britpop books that are out there in the market then, guys, at the minute? Because this year, yours isn't the only one coming out this year. There's a couple of others that are out launching. There's one coming out in another month's time and things. Britpop seems to be having an upswing in popularity again at the minute. How is yours?
Do you want to take that one, Matt?
Yeah, well, I mean, I haven't read the other books, so I don't know exactly what they're like. But I think from our perspective, it's kind of our teenage years. So you get an element of us growing up through them and what it was like growing up through them. And at the same time, we've kind of tried to write it more as a sort of book that you can flick to a page, find an album, read a bit about it, and go and listen to that album if you wanted, or I haven't listened to that in years, I'll go off and do that, rather than sort of a broader Britpop picture or a broader band picture. It's actually really quite focused on individual albums that, hopefully people can go away and sort of listen. And it's that sort of hopefully balance between proper research or vaguely proper research and then our own opinions as well. So hopefully that makes it a bit different to some of the others. I mean, I haven't seen anything quite like what we've done on this in other books, really.
I think it's possibly and probably one of the only books on the subject which concentrates largely on the music, like an in-depth look at the music, rather than necessarily the personalities and the relationships involved. Obviously, we talk about the love triangle at the center of Britpop and the hate triangle between Blur and Oasis. That's not even a triangle, but ultimately, this book talks about the music and I suppose our reaction to the music and what it meant to us.
Yeah, That's good. I mean, I haven't read every Britpop book out there, but I did thoroughly enjoy it, and I will. It's definitely one that I'm going to go back to more. And it's well done, guys, for putting it together, because it is. I have really enjoyed it, and when I found it last year, you'll know, I was looking on Amazon for ideas for Christmas gifts, ideas to give to all presents, and I was like, oh, book out next year, and I put it on my news video on YouTube, and that's how it started. Well, yeah,
yeah, and thank you for doing that. That
Yeah,
came as a massive shock to us, because we didn't even know we didn't even know it had been put up for pre-sale or whatever. It was a great way to find out about it.
I think that I found it, and I was already shocked to see that I think it was the Kindle version was already on offer, and it hadn't even been released yet. It was already like £2 or £3 off.
I don't think we'd even finished the last 2 chapters at that point.
All right. Right. Well, thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining me. I haven't got anything else to ask you. It's been really good to chat to you. It's been really nice to meet you, Matt, and nice to meet you, Pete. It's been great.
Nice to meet you. Thank you for having us.
Thanks so much for having us.
No wonder. Thank you very much.
Cheers, David. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye-bye.